Have you ever experienced betrayal? I hope not. It's a dreadful sensation that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Unfortunately, I had to personally confront it, and it would have been acceptable if it were a minor transgression. After all, everyone makes mistakes. But what occurred in my life and how my closest acquaintances deceived me, that's something else entirely. I assure you, those involved in this will deeply regret it. This is my narrative. Enjoy hearing it. My name is Todd, and I consider myself quite attractive and intelligent, with a healthy self-esteem. I work as a programmer for a commercial company and have achieved a certain level of success. It's quite remarkable that I can work just 50 minutes a week and still earn a substantial income. However, it doesn't mean I'm idle the rest of the time. I'm constantly learning and developing new skills daily. I'm the one who turned my life around. I've read numerous motivational books, watched interviews with successful individuals, and pulled myself out of poverty. Consequently, I value everything I have, and every day I express gratitude for my blessings. Yet perhaps my most significant achievement in life is my wife Judith, who is 4 years my junior. She's 25 and I'm 29. Judith works as a model, participating in various advertising campaigns and boasting a substantial following on social media. She thoroughly enjoys her life. Judith possesses a slender, sun-kissed physique, with well-toned thighs and an appealing bust. However, this wasn't always the case. Meeting me had a profound impact on her life. Initially, she worked as an ordinary cashier in a store with no particular aspirations or objectives. However, I detected a spark within her and played a part in kindling it. Even back then, I held a decent position, and though my income wasn't as substantial as it is today, I could afford a comfortable lifestyle. At my encouragement, Judith left her cashier job, and I helped her connect with a capable producer who aided her in achieving success on social media. Our combined earnings now enable us to enjoy a lavish lifestyle. This might come across as a typical success story or some such, and to be honest, I thought the same initially until reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I have 2 friends from my school days, Philip and Alan, who were by my side up to a certain point. At the age of 18, we ventured into our first business, an ice cream stand. Unfortunately, it didn't thrive and went under within 6 months. We attempted another business selling hot dogs but had to shut it down after just 5 months. Subsequent endeavors were equally unsuccessful. At the age of 21, I came to the realization that something needed to change. I ventured into the IT field, which was unfamiliar territory for me, but I recognized its potential. My friends didn't support my decision, insisting, it's a waste of time. You should engage in tangible pursuits and create something of your own, not work for someone else. I disagreed because I was thinking ahead. I understood that becoming a proficient specialist would eventually empower me to launch my own project, and that's precisely how it unfolded. Philip and Alan persist in their attempts to establish a business. Currently, they manage a single fast food stand that has been operational for 3 years, generating a modest profit they divide between themselves. However, when compared to my earnings, their profit seems insignificant. Instead of exploring new opportunities and progressing, they, like determined sheep, continue to focus on a single endeavor. While they have achieved some success, I suspect it may not be the outcome they had envisioned. As I enjoy the financial freedom to travel to various countries, purchase expensive clothing and automobiles, dine in fine restaurants, and have a wife with model-like looks, these 2 remain in the city, grappling with the daily stress of their business. I hold no resentment towards them for choosing not to join me. It was their decision, and I respect it. We still maintain a connection, although it's not as close as it once was. They are welcome to visit my home on weekends, relax on my leather couch, and engage in activities like playing video games and discussing ordinary matters together. Despite our disparities, we maintain a strong relationship and frequently meet, usually at my residence. They appreciated my opulent home, but it didn't immediately dawn on me that my wife also captivated their attention. To me, gatherings with Philip and Alan served as a form of diversion. They were unassuming individuals without formal education, and I appreciated the ability to sit down with them, share a beer, and engage in light-hearted conversations. I made no effort to flaunt my achievements in their presence. On the contrary, I aimed to relate to them on a down-to-earth level. Judith never objected to me spending a couple of evenings each week with my friends. She had her own circle of girlfriends, and she frequently socialized with them. Our home was always bustling with activity due to our hospitable nature. One evening, as I was heading back home, I was halted by our neighbor Jimmy, who happened to be a director. He greeted me and asked, "Todd, how's everything going? I don't want to intrude, and please don't think I'm prying, but I've noticed something unusual. When you're not around, there's often a Ford parked near your house. I even took a photo of it." I took his phone and examined the picture, which showed a white Ford, my friend Philip's car. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mr. Jefferson. I'll look into what's happening." You're welcome. Oh wait, can I ask you for a favor? When you're at home during the day, could you keep an eye on my house? If you happen to spot that car, please let me know. This was undeniably a concerning situation that couldn't be disregarded. Why was my friend visiting my wife while I was at work? With this question in mind, I entered the house, where Judith warmly welcomed me. She was wearing a white robe and without uttering a word began, "Darling, I'm delighted you're home. I have a surprise for you. You need to pull this string." I pulled the string, unveiling a piece of artwork before me. Judith had acquired a new seductive costume, a nurse's outfit. "I think you might be a bit tired, but I know how to remedy that. First, you should take a shower, and then I'll be waiting for you in my medical office." I swiftly took a shower, and Judith and I shared an unforgettable night. Such spontaneity caused all my worries to vanish, and I wholeheartedly embraced the moment. The following day, I had no prior commitments, which meant that Judith and I would have the entire day together. I pondered whether Philip might have dropped by yesterday to retrieve something he had forgotten and just made a brief visit. That's what I preferred to believe. I didn't want to entertain the thought that Judith could be unfaithful to me, especially with my friend. Judith and I had a rather ordinary day, and in the evening, we had plans to unwind by watching a movie. However, our intentions were disrupted by Alan, who wanted to invite us somewhere. How about going to the club tonight? It'll be a blast. You can bring Judith along." I declined the offer, not only because Judith and I had our own plans for the evening, but also because I didn't particularly enjoy going to clubs. Plus, I knew Judith would find it unexciting since Philip and Alan didn't have girlfriends. Philip had made attempts at relationships and even got married, but in the end, he cheated on his wife, leading to their separation. Alan, on the other hand, had encountered misfortune with his relationships, and the longest one had lasted only a year. I repeatedly advised them that if they wanted to go out together, they needed to find girlfriends. They would simply nod in agreement and assure me they'd find someone soon. I informed Judith about Alan's invitation and detected her disappointment. It seemed she was eager to go out and have some fun, though I didn't pay it much heed. The following day, duty called and I had to head to work. I bid Judith farewell with a kiss and left. Around noon, my neighbor Jimmy phoned to inform me, "Todd, there's a car parked near your house again. I can't pinpoint the exact time, but I thought I'd give you a heads up." Thanks, Jimmy. How long will you be at home?" All day." "All right, if it's not too much trouble, could you give me a call once you notice that the car has departed?" "Sure, I'll keep you posted." We exchanged pleasantries, and my mind was once again flooded with doubts. 5 hours had elapsed since Jimmy's call, and throughout this duration, I remained in a state of uncertainty. Suddenly, the phone rang. "Todd, the car's leaving." 2 men got in, Jimmy informed me. I expressed my gratitude to Jimmy and hung up. Now there were no lingering doubts. My 2 friends were visiting my wife when I was absent. While initially, I had suspected it was only Philip, I now realized that Alan was also involved. At first, I attempted to console myself with the idea that perhaps they were preparing an early surprise for my upcoming birthday, which was still 4 months away. Wasn't it too premature? To prevent undue panic, I decided to reach out to an acquaintance and requested a couple of video cameras and a listening device. After finishing work, I collected the equipment. When asked why I needed it, I fabricated an excuse, stating it wasn't for personal use. As I drove home, my hands trembled. I even felt a sense of shame for resorting to spying on my wife due to my unwavering conviction that she couldn't betray me. Upon entering the house, Judith greeted me with joy. We enjoyed a delicious meal and later retired to bed for another intimate encounter. Throughout this time, I failed to detect anything unusual about her. Typically, when a woman is unfaithful to a man, her behavior and demeanor change, but my wife remained her usual self, perhaps even better. The following morning, Judith prepared for a promotional video shoot, and I accompanied her in the back seat of my car. There was a bag containing the forgotten video cameras. During the journey, Judith inquired about them. "Oh, what's that you got there, kiddo?" she asked. It's some work-related stuff. I need to discard it later when I leave, I replied. With this explanation, I managed to address two concerns at once. While Judith was occupied with her work, I made my way back home. Time flew by, and I failed to notice that 2 hours had slipped away. Nevertheless, I successfully set up all the cameras, one in the bedroom, another in the living room, a third in the kitchen, and a fourth one outside. In my preoccupation, I completely forgot that I was supposed to pick up Judith. Stepping out of the house, I suddenly spotted a white Ford pulling up, and to my surprise, both Judith and Philip emerged from the car. Judith wasted no time in expressing her frustration, stating, "I called you 20 times. Where were you disappearing to, Todd?" I quickly checked my phone and confirmed her claim with the presence of 20 missed calls from her. I promptly offered my apologies, but Judith walked past me in silence. It was then that Philip approached. "Dude, you messed up big time, and I had to handle things myself," he remarked. "Sorry, I just got caught up. It was an urgent call, and I needed to address a project," I explained. "All right, no big deal. I can help you out, considering how many times you've bailed me out," Philip generously offered. We bid our farewells, and I retreated back into the house. The entire evening unfolded in a somber atmosphere. Judith remained upset with me for failing to pick her up, so I made several attempts to apologize. "You promised to pick me up. Why didn't you come?" she reproached me. I expressed my remorse, saying, "There was an urgent order. Forgive me, I won't let it happen again." We eventually reconciled, sharing a hug before retiring to bed. I felt deeply ashamed of suspecting her of any wrongdoing. While I hadn't entirely believed the accusations, I couldn't ignore Jimmy's photographs, thus I felt compelled to personally verify everything. During the night, while Judith slumbered, I made the decision to unlock her phone and inspect her messages. I found nothing suspicious in Judith's messages. Her phone appeared clean. With a clear conscience, I retired to sleep. 2 weeks had elapsed since I'd installed cameras in my home. While I was at work, I diligently observed Judith's activities, and all seemed well, no hints of anything suspicious. Following that initial night, I continued to sporadically check Judith's phone a couple of times, and it consistently remained clean. There were no indications of infidelity or communication with my friends. Life proceeded normally. We enjoyed quality time with Philip and Alan, explored the city, visited interesting places, and generally led a peaceful existence. One day at work, I reluctantly decided to review the camera footage. I had grown weary of this routine, recognizing that each time I found nothing, rendering it seemingly pointless. Other thoughts began to plague me, pondering the possibility that Judith might discover the cameras, interpreting my actions as a lack of trust in her. As I gazed at the camera feed, I witnessed Judith opening the door, an unexpected sight. I activated the outdoor camera and spotted a white Ford parked near my house, with Philip and Alan standing on the porch. Judith warmly welcomed my friends, and they entered. I discreetly unplugged the listening device, which had been discreetly placed in the living room beneath the coffee table. Judith proceeded upstairs to the bedroom, while Philip and Alan removed their shirts, lounging bare-chested on the couch. Judith then retrieved a provocative costume from the wardrobe, the same one she had worn for me the previous night. I watched their activities closely, pondering my course of action. It had become evident that it was time to deal with this situation, quite literally taking out the trash. I initiated a call to an individual with an untraceable number, whose identity couldn't be disclosed. But for our purposes, let's refer to him as Mr. Keller. He specialized in discreetly handling requested disposal of undesirable matters. I phoned Mr. Keller, recounting the entire distressing situation, my voice quivering, and the phone nearly slipping from my grasp. He understood. Meet us at the payment spot, and once payment is made, the vehicle will proceed to your residence for the task. Our conversation was succinct, and the cost for such a service was substantial. I needed to hasten to the designated payment location. Fortunately, I had sufficient cash in my car for this service. I decided to review the camera feed and observed my wife already engaged in intimate acts with my friends. The nausea welled up within me because had I not uncovered this, I would have returned home in the evening, oblivious to the betrayal. I drove recklessly, feeling as though I had lost control of myself. Tremors coursed through me, and I feared I might faint. Overwhelmed by anguish, I even shed a tear. I couldn't fathom how my childhood friends and my wife could betray me like this. I swiftly reached the rendezvous point, an abandoned building. My task was to leave an envelope containing the payment, so I discreetly placed it under a stone and sent a confirmation message, eggs laid. Almost immediately, I received a response. My chicks flew out of the nest. I rushed back home, parking the car nearby, and began observing from a distance. Glancing at my phone, I received a call from Jimmy, reporting a white Ford near my house. I assured him that everything was under control. Resuming the camera feed, I witnessed two men enjoying my wife on my leather couch, an agonizing sight that felt akin to watching an explicit film. The pain resurfaced, but I sensed that justice would soon prevail. Approximately 10 minutes after my return home, a white van pulled up. Three burly men, clad entirely in black attire with balaclavas concealing their faces, swiftly stormed into my house. One of them incapacitated Philip with a single blow, another subdued Alan, and the third silenced Judith. They were forced to the floor, their hands bound, bags placed over their heads, and promptly loaded into the van, which sped away. I bore witness to this sequence of events through the surveillance cameras, marveling at their efficiency and professionalism. The task was accomplished in approximately 40 seconds. All that remained for me was to patiently await the results. Over the next couple of days, to be cautious, I decided to consult my neighbor to check if he had witnessed anything unusual. Fortunately, he hadn't observed anything out of the ordinary. Upon my return from work that evening, I contacted the police and reported my wife as missing. Prior to this, I had taken the precaution of disabling and disposing of the phones belonging to Judith and my friends, rendering them untraceable. The following day, a tow truck removed the white Ford from my residence. I informed the police that, as usual, I had come home to find my wife missing, without any discernible clues. All the neighbors in the vicinity provided their statements, corroborating the frequent presence of the white Ford near my house when I wasn't present. To my surprise, it wasn't only Jimmy who had spotted this car near my residence. Since the vehicle was registered under Philip's name, he emerged as the primary suspect. Initially, I too fell under suspicion, but a verification call to my workplace confirmed that I hadn't left on the day of the disappearance. While the investigation was ongoing, I diligently backed up all the camera recordings onto a concealed disk. 4 days later, I received an anonymous video depicting the delivery of 3 individuals to a specified location. The video showed them being unloaded from a van with their eyes, hands, and feet bound in an empty field. All 3 were in tears, pleading for mercy, and I derived a peculiar sense of satisfaction from watching them. Considering my primary stipulation that no one should lose their life, they were left in the desert with their hands unbound and instructed to remain stationary for an hour. Subsequent to this, the vehicle departed, and their fate became solely their responsibility. They were transported in a van from Nevada to Texas, and at that juncture, I no longer harbored any concern regarding their prospects of returning alive. A month later, the investigation reached an impasse, and the detective proposed the theory that my wife might have eloped with Philip, engaging in an extramarital affair. I acknowledged this possibility. Alan, on the other hand, was not pursued since he lacked parents or even a significant other, and their shared business had crumbled with no one tending to it for a month. Opting against an immediate divorce, which might arouse suspicion, I retained legal counsel and initiated the legal proceedings. In the event Judith failed to return home within a couple of months, we could initiate divorce proceedings on the grounds of her unexplained absence. A month later, I was summoned to the police station for an identification procedure. They presented me with a photograph featuring 2 men and 1 woman, none of whom I immediately recognized as my wife and 2 friends. They appeared to have aged far beyond their actual years, which I found somewhat ironic. They were dressed in tattered, threadbare attire, appearing emaciated and overall in dire condition. I positively identified all 3 individuals and inquired about their whereabouts. The investigator explained that in Texas, a couple of disheveled individuals had perpetrated a gas station robbery while in the nude, stolen another person's vehicle and subsequently driven off in an unknown direction. Precisely 24 hours later, the abandoned car was discovered at the roadside. Curiously, they had stolen a vehicle with an empty fuel tank, rendering their escape short-lived. Eventually, they were apprehended and are presently serving prison sentences. I sighed in relief, reflecting, at least they're still alive. This outcome had not been anticipated. I had assumed they possessed enough common sense to safely make their way back home. Instead, driven by desperation, they had resorted to criminal acts. It horrified me to realize that these individuals had been a significant part of my life, and I didn't harbor any sympathy for them. Honestly, who could feel sorry for them? I successfully obtained a divorce, and while I can't describe it as an easy feat, I did manage to achieve it, officially gaining my freedom. I made a trip to Texas once, with the intention of looking each of them in the eye, the very people who had betrayed me. All 3 of them appeared entirely disoriented, but the most intriguing aspect was that none of them even suspected my involvement. Not a single one considered the possibility of this being retribution for their betrayal, and it somewhat saddened me that they failed to grasp the gravity of their transgressions against me. It brought me satisfaction to remain in the shadows, yet as I observed these individuals, they seemed utterly unfamiliar to me. They were lost souls. When I directly questioned Judith about her betrayal, she responded quietly, "And never." I merely smiled and walked away. Frankly, I had expected some resistance. I thought they would return home and recognize me as the one who sent them into the desert. However, they proved to be so feeble, so foolish that they only deepened their predicament. I had provided them an opportunity to reveal their character under duress, but instead, they exhibited cowardice and opted for criminal acts. I can't say how I would have acted in their situation, but I can say this much: I wouldn't have found myself in such dire circumstances. I value the people in my life, maintain respect, and always adhere to the truth. However, if someone crosses me, I won't remain passive, I will take action. I've relocated to Florida and plan to reside here for at least a year. If I happen to find a girlfriend, that's fine. If not, that's perfectly acceptable too. I've adopted a more relaxed approach to life. I possess enough financial security to live comfortably throughout my old age without depriving myself of anything. I'm a prudent and intelligent individual, constantly evolving. My desire is for everyone who hears my story to evolve as well, regardless of their circumstances, and to make the right choices for their own lives. When life hurls challenges your way, seize a rake and clean up. Trash belongs in the bin, not in your life. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. This concludes the tale. We find the story quite intriguing and would be keen to hear your perspective. How long do you believe the protagonist's wife was unfaithful to him with his friends? What might have driven the wife to cheat on her husband with his friends? Did the protagonist administer the appropriate punishment to those who wronged him, or should he have taken a gentler approach? In our view, the wife engaged in this affair for an extended period, as she had learned to conceal her emotions and conduct her infidelity discreetly. Unlike his friends, her infidelity appears to have been systematic, and we estimate it began approximately a year ago. The motive behind her betrayal seems rather straightforward. The woman, having transitioned from poverty to affluence so rapidly, may have felt compelled to seek new experiences. As for who initiated this transgression, we believe it was the wife who took the initiative, although the friends might have also pressed the matter, potentially fueled by jealousy and a desire to compensate for their own shortcomings. The protagonist opted for a severe form of retribution. It's undeniably harsh, yet he perceives it as just. He considers it akin to clearing away garbage, and while he expresses some remorse, he ultimately finds solace in his actions. Nevertheless, we believe there were alternative, gentler approaches available, potentially within the bounds of the law. Your insights in the comments would be greatly appreciated, as they assist us in improving and selecting only the finest stories. Story 2. In August 2022, after 15 years of marriage, my relationship faced significant challenges. We grappled with issues in communication, finances, and intimacy, adding strain to our already hectic lives. My wife often held me responsible for our troubles. In an attempt to address these issues, my wife proposed a trial separation. We had 3 kids, aged 11, 13, and 15, making this decision particularly difficult, especially considering our daughters' ages. Within 2 weeks of the separation, my 15-year-old daughter confided in me, expressing her suspicion that my wife might be involved in an affair during this period. My wife suggested that I stay with a single friend who had experienced a divorce and had ample space. While I wasn't thrilled about the idea, I consented to maintain a peaceful atmosphere at home. Experiencing constant arguments, I didn't want my children to endure the kind of tumultuous household I grew up in, marked by my parents' frequent conflicts. My 13 and 15-year-old daughters weren't pleased with the separation either. They wished for our family to remain intact, especially since I was their favored parent. Despite their reluctance, I persuaded them that the separation was a temporary measure, hoping it would eventually contribute to restoring harmony in our family. Financial challenges had been an enduring issue throughout our marriage. We had married at a young age and lacked advanced skills, making it tough for us to make ends meet. The house we resided in had been inherited from my grandparents. Initially, I had hoped that the trial separation would make my wife realize how much she and the kids missed me, leading her to ask me to return. However, during the initial weeks away from home, she often contacted me, not for emotional support or physical intimacy, but to address household concerns. It felt as though I had become the designated handyman, responsible for handling household issues and disciplining the kids when she found it challenging. I was fulfilling the role of a father, but the role of a husband remained unfulfilled. I started to suspect that she might be involved in an affair, especially because our bedroom had lost its spark for quite some time. Whenever we were intimate, I was consistently the one taking the initiative, and she appeared unenthusiastic to fully engage. Then, 3 weeks after I had left the house, a bombshell dropped. During a phone conversation with my 15-year-old daughter, she confided in me, sharing her suspicion that her mom, my wife, might be romantically involved with someone else. This revelation added further complexity to our already challenging situation. When I inquired about the evidence behind her suspicions, my 15-year-old daughter admitted she didn't possess concrete proof. Nevertheless, she pointed out shifts in her mom's behavior that raised concerns. According to her, my wife appeared happier and sometimes almost giddy. She hurried to leave home, returned late, and dressed up more than usual. Additionally, my wife frequently engaged in late-night phone conversations accompanied by laughter. My daughter, aspiring to reunite our family, believed that if I confronted my wife and exposed the suspected affair, it might pave the way for our reconciliation. In her view, this could lead to a happily ever after scenario for our family. This conversation with my daughter raised several red flags. While I had harbored suspicions, my wife had effectively concealed any wrongdoing. Now, with these noticeable changes, it appeared that the trial separation was merely a smokescreen, providing her with more freedom to engage in questionable behavior. It's remarkable how over 15 years, one can become more trusting and lower their guard with someone. I knew my wife worked for a distribution company, primarily interacting with older 18-wheeler drivers. Considering she was one of the few women at her workplace and exceptionally attractive, she naturally drew a lot of attention. We began dating during our teenage years and are now both 35. Over the course of 15 years, it's fascinating how one can grow more trusting and gradually lower their guard in a relationship. I was aware that my wife worked for a distribution company and her interactions primarily involved older 18-wheeler drivers. Given her status as one of the few women at her workplace and her striking looks, she naturally garnered a fair share of attention. We started dating during our teens, and now at the age of 35, we've been together for 15 years. After my conversation with my daughter and the increasing suspicion that arose, I made the decision to secretly visit her workplace to uncover the reasons behind her late nights. I was concerned that she might be engaged in an extramarital affair with a colleague from her job. Consequently, I hoped that when I observed her workplace after hours, I would find her car among the last two in the parking lot, indicating she or the person she might be involved with would depart together. I parked my car on the opposite side of her workplace, keeping a close watch on her vehicle to see what would transpire. To my surprise, she exited the building at the anticipated time and entered her car. Just as I was about to abandon my surveillance and head home, she drove off in a direction away from our residence. This piqued my curiosity, prompting me to follow her. It was November around 6 p.m., and darkness was descending. She proceeded towards the highway and directed her route towards a truck stop. Wishing to give her the benefit of the doubt due to her occupation in logistics, dispatch for truckers, I considered the possibility that her presence there might be work-related. She parked her car in proximity to an 18-wheeler and exited her vehicle. It was at that moment I observed her attire, which was conspicuously revealing. Upon her entry into the passenger side of the truck, I promptly began recording her using my cell phone. I moved my car closer, disembarked, and located a vantage point where I could ascertain whether she occupied the passenger seat. The dim lighting necessitated my closer approach to obtain a clear view, and regrettably, there was no room for doubt regarding the nature of the situation. She wasn't seated in the passenger area. Both she and the truck driver were inside the truck sleeper compartment. I lingered in the blind spot of the passenger side for nearly 30 minutes, anticipating her departure from the truck. During this time, I could overhear what seemed to be intimate sounds, intensifying my feelings of hatred unlike any I had ever experienced. When she eventually alighted from the passenger side, she appeared startled, hastily adjusting her hair and attire as if she had seen a ghost. As she descended, she noticed me recording her with the flash of my phone activated. Initially, she couldn't identify me due to the flash in the darkness. I recall her inquiry, "Hey, why are you recording me?" Her realization of my identity occurred as soon as I responded, "I'm just making sure I capture you engaging in inappropriate behavior." Once she grasped that it was me, she started to vehemently assert that appearances were deceiving and contended she was merely engaged in her employment. My retort was, "Yeah, you're certainly employed. I had no idea you were involved in illicit activities on the side." Despite her protestations, she attempted to seize my camera. I pushed her away and continued recording as I trailed her to her car. The individual she was involved with seemed to believe he could intervene, and he emerged from his cab holding a firearm. When he observed the commotion, he confronted me and insisted I stop recording, making threats. I remained steadfast, asserting my right to record my wife's unfaithful actions. My wife implored him to lower the firearm, and fellow truckers who were acquainted with him gathered around, attempting to persuade him to relinquish the weapon. A more rational person might have discontinued recording when confronted with a weapon, but at that moment, my judgment was clouded. Upon realizing that I was undeterred by his intimidation, the man holstered his weapon and retreated to his truck. My wife also departed, but prior to her departure, several individuals appeared to urge me to cease recording, uttering phrases such as "It's public," and to stop recording. Nevertheless, I was aware of my right to record for my own protection. Following my wife's departure, I contacted the police and awaited their arrival at the scene. Upon their arrival, the truck driver attempted to leave, but the police intercepted him. I presented them with the recording, leading to his arrest for brandishing a firearm. He faced charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Instead of proceeding to my friend's house for the night, I made my way directly home, which was likely around 10 p.m. En route, I phoned my 15-year-old daughter to apprise her of what I had just discovered her mother doing and to inform her of my imminent return. Upon my arrival home, my wife was already embroiled in a dispute with my daughter, and her siblings mirrored her actions. She initiated name-calling directed at my wife, which under ordinary circumstances might have warranted discipline. However, it felt like an excessive level of hypocrisy given that my wife had been attempting to control our daughter's dating choices and clothing, all the while expelling me from the house to rendezvous with men at the truck stop. She contended that she was not involved with men but rather a singular individual. By the way, this man was nearly 50 years old, and based on what I gathered, he was a regular customer, leaving me with no doubt that she was engaging in illicit activities. I informed her that she couldn't stay in the house and suggested she could stay at her friend's place instead. This resulted in a physical confrontation, and I began removing her belongings from the house. The children were all awake, crying and witnessing the tumultuous scene in the middle of the night. It was an unfortunate situation fueled by my anger. Eventually, things calmed down because I wanted to avoid involving the police, and I had no intention of leaving my own home. She was aware that everyone in the house was against her, recognizing her wrongdoing, but she attempted to shift blame onto me and downplay the significance of her actions. That night, I slept in the master bedroom while she spent the night on the couch. The following morning, I reached out to my friend, explained the situation, and he connected me with an attorney to initiate the divorce proceedings. Since we had no shared property and the house was inherited, she wouldn't have a claim to it in the divorce. Some individuals suggested that I should have taken a different course of action, but I showed my daughter the video recording on my phone, allowing her to witness everything that had transpired. I explained to her the reasons behind my decision to end the marriage, and she concurred with my choice. I didn't want to jeopardize her employment by reporting her actions, as I knew it would impose an additional financial burden on me during the divorce proceedings. Upon learning of my divorce filing, she suddenly expressed a desire to work on our marriage. She asserted that her infidelity was a result of my lack of attention, emphasizing that it had only been with that one individual. She claimed she had no intentions of leaving me, as the man she had cheated with was also married. According to her, he had been pursuing her for months, showering her with gifts, and she eventually yielded but later regretted her actions. Despite her efforts to reconcile, I found no compelling reason to salvage the marriage. Attempting to engage her in meaningful communication had grown increasingly challenging, especially when she had been willing to abandon our marriage during her time at the truck stop. Our relationship had become marred by incessant arguments and conflicts, and the trust between us had been irreparably shattered. It appeared to be a wise choice for me to have sole occupancy of the house with my children, particularly since I had a better rapport with them than with her. She could continue her pursuits at the truck stop. Throughout the divorce proceedings, she contended that I had influenced the children against her, asserting that they all preferred to live with me and had no desire to remain in her care. Given my possession of the house and my appearance as the more stable parent, the children unequivocally expressed their wish to reside with me. Consequently, I was granted full custody, and she was obligated to provide child support. As for the truck driver, he faced severe repercussions. He was charged with a Class A misdemeanor for his actions. This driver, employed by another company and operating a fleet truck, encountered significant consequences following his employer's discovery of the arrest. He was terminated from his job. While I had considered revealing the video to his wife, I had reservations. I didn't want to push a man to his limits, especially someone reckless enough to brandish a firearm in a public setting when caught with his spouse, despite posing no actual threat to him. I ultimately decided against it. Even though the divorce wouldn't be officially concluded for several months, I already had custody of my children. Meanwhile, my soon-to-be ex-wife began residing in a studio apartment.